Dee is a very interesting character, worth spending some time on, because Dee is the last person to be able to unify into one worldview science and mathematics and magic and astrology all together. So he is the greatest magician of his age and the greatest scientist of his age. A very strange incident happened, which was on a cold day in April at his house in Mortlake, which is on the outskirts of London. Now it's completely surrounded by modern London. He's working at his desk at his room in Mortlake, and he goes outside. There's some disturbance in the garden, and he goes outside. And his story, and we have only his story, is that an angel descended in a ball of light and gave him an object which is to this day on exhibit in the British Museum. If you ever have a chance, it's worth hunting it down. It's in the Renaissance Hall, and it's a piece of black polished obsidian, roughly about this big and about that thick and very highly polished. He called it the Shew Stone, S-H-E-W. And what the deal was you could look into the Shew Stone if you had the right talent, and it was a magical theater. There were gods and demons and female spirits and all kinds of things swirling around this thing. Well, for the next many years, the Shew Stone was the major guiding force on Dee's life. And a guy came to him named Edward Kelly. So this guy Kelly had an immense facility with this Shew Stone. I mean, he could just sit down with it, and it is one of the most puzzling and undiscussed episodes in the evolution of Western thought. The straight people just say, whoa, this is a bunch of crap. However, it's very puzzling, because if he was a con artist, he must have been a con artist of immense cleverness, because often the way the Dee angels would work is they would deliver very, very long messages in Latin backwards. And Kelly would just dictate this stuff at a very rapid speed, and Dee would write it down, and then they would put away the Shew Stone, and then they would very laboriously rewrite this stuff from back to front. Well, what kind of a polymathic talent was Edward Kelly, that he could invert whole pages of Latin and reel it off and then have it be reconstructed and make sense? Also, you see this, we know about this because Dee kept a diary over the years that this was all going on. It's one of the most astonishing books in all of English literature, and until the last 10 years, the 1658 edition was the only edition ever published. It's called A True and Faithful Relation, or in full, A True and Faithful Relation of what passed for many years between Dr. Dee and some spirits. They were angelic magicians, is what they were, and they were evoking these things through the use of sigils, which are magical symbols. And then there became stress on magical alphabets. Enochian is one of these magical alphabets, or languages, rather. John Dee, remember I mentioned the whole 10-year episode with the Shew Stone. Well, one of the subjects which these entities that Dee and Kelly were dealing with returned to again and again and again were the Enochian, this language which they said was the true language that Abraham used to communicate with the angels. And it has a special alphabet, an alien alphabet. And there's even been published an Enochian dictionary of some 4,000 or 5,000 words. There was a very bizarre, this is just a footnote, but a very bizarre episode in the mid-1950s. There was a woman who was a kind of clairvoyant, and she was in contact with flying saucers. I mean, now everybody and their dog is in contact with flying saucers, but at that time it was fairly rare enough that she became an object of interest to the CIA. And at one point she was in the CIA building in Langley, Virginia, and they were interviewing her, and she said, well, there's a flying saucer right outside the window. And these guys rushed to the window and looked, and there was some kind of thing in the sky, and she said, it's giving me a message for you, for this colonel. and the message was Affa, 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 A-F-F-A. So he wrote this down. Well, then I didn't read this. I looked it up. I had a hunch. Affa is the Enochian word for nothingness.